Those who are recognized as being right after trials.
James 1:12-15. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death.
As we live in faith, there comes times when our faith is tested, and there comes times when we must test others. Some cry because the tests are painful, their hearts ache, and they are often in need of comfort after the test. There isn't a single person who hasn't gone through a trial. There is no one that has lived their lives without ever being tested or testing others. People are subject to a variety of trials. They are tested in human relationships. There are times when we test ourselves. There are times when we are put through a trial by the devil. God also gives us trials. In addition, we also get tested by our environment, the place where we are. Even generational differences become trials for people.
When missionaries entered the Eskimo area for the first time, they were put on trial because of the different culture there. The Eskimos treat guests who visit their house very well. In their culture, it is normal for men to lend a guest their wife for the evening as a kind gesture. Since it is cold there, the guest is supposed to lie down with a woman and thus stay warm for the night. If a guest refuses to comply with this, the Eskimo people believe that the guest is rejecting their good intentions and will try to kill them. However, this does not mean that the missionaries were able to go through with borrowing another man's wife for the evening. So, they had a hard time trying to decline the Eskimo people's good intentions while trying to stay alive and fulfilling their mission. A certain African tribe is said to boil and eat their parents after they die. They think,
how could I ever bury my precious parents in the ground? I must eat them and keep them with me in my body.
If those people were to look at us and see how we bury our parents' bodies in the ground, they'd probably think that we're terrible people. There was a time that I visited a Malaysian tribe. At the house I stayed at, there were dozens of skeletons hanging on the ceiling of the living room. This particular Malaysian tribe hung their parents' skeletons. Their ancestors had made it a tradition. It was awful. There were a lot of bamboo trees in that area too. It was very eerie because during the night, the wind would make the bamboo rustle. But the worst part of it all was that the skeletons would bump into each other because of the wind, and the sound that they produced was like that of ghosts. In this way, different cultures can also become trials for us.
Everyone goes through trials. However, there are those who are particularly good at getting them. Those who are more likely to go through trials are 1. Those who have a hard time distinguishing between what is wrong and what is right are more likely to receive trials. They misunderstand small things and throw fits. They are also very stubborn. It is difficult to understand their personality and actions.
2. Strong egoists are also more likely to go through trials. Egoists only think about themselves. I have seen a person like this before. It was a person who used to come to church at dawn to pray every day. One day, they stopped coming. Eventually, I found out the reason why they stopped coming was because they didn't like that the pastor was listening in on their prayers instead of praying himself. Those who give out many trials to others are problematic, but those who receive a lot of trials are also problematic, especially because people like this don't have friends. After all, who would like a person like that?
3. Trials are things that everyone has to go through, yet we tend to exclude ourselves from the concept of trials. The Bible we read is a record of many events and many trials. During an event in the Bible, David went under a certain trial, and at another point in the Bible, Abraham also went under trial. It is the responses of those under trials that make up the Bible. Despite this, as we read the Bible, we do not think that we, ourselves, are involved with the content of the Bible in any way. We think that the events that occur in the Bible are merely the stories in the Bible. We think they are merely David's event, Abraham's event, Daniel's event, and so on. In this way, we believe that the stories in the Bible do not have anything to do with us, until the day that we are met with such a trial ourselves. This is why we are dualistic in our faith and life. The Bible is the word that has been compiled over the ages and given to me, yet, because it is other people's stories that I am reading, it does not have any direct effect on my life. But the Bible is not a Bible written for David. The Bible is not a Bible written for Abraham. Then for whom is the Bible written? The Bible is written for me. It is written for I.
4. Many people only consider pain to be a trial. They think if they get sick, it's a test, and if they're healthy, they think it's a blessing. They think if they fail, it's a test, but if they succeed, it's not a test. If something is stolen from them, they consider it a test. On the other hand, if they receive a gift, then it's not a test. It's not like that. What other trials are there for you when you are already sick, but when you are healthy, you will go through trials? When you fail something, you may be weak, but you will be pure. But when you succeed at something, you will be tested. In the case that someone steals from you, what more is there that you could do? But in the case that a pastor receives something, he must consider whether it is a gift or a bribe. It is when he receives a gift that he is tested. He must discern whether the gift is truly a gift bought for him, or if it is something that is merely being used to raise his opinion of the one who gifted him.
Let's take a moment to talk about the history of Jinyoung. Koryo ruled the peninsula for 474 years until Wangkon was founded in 918, and the country was renamed Choson. In 1392, Genghis Khan, who lived in the Mongolian grasslands, occupied China and built the Yuan dynasty. Starting from 1231, they invaded Koryo for 28 years and brought disaster upon the country. Koryo became a tributary of the Yuan dynasty for 80 years. The kings of Koryo were forced to accept the Yuan dynasty's emperors' daughters as their wives, and thus make their countries become allies. At the same time, the kings had to use the last name of the Yuan dynasty's royal family, as if they were pledging their loyalty to their rule. Among the 34 kings of Koryo, the 25th was King Cheonyar, the 26th was King Chonson, the 27th was King Chonsok, the 28th was King Cheonhye, the 29th was King Cheonmok, and the 30th was King Cheonjong. Cheong is a Chinese surname, not Korean. This list is meant to show you how the Korean kings of Koryo were forced to take on Chinese surnames because of their forced marriages into the Yuan dynasty's royal family. 6 kings were forced to rule over Koryo while it was a tributary of the Yuan dynasty. The Yuan occupied China, Uzbekistan, Turkey, the Mediterranean, South Russia, and Eastern Europe. It dominated over an area that was 3 times larger than the size of the country Napoleon controlled. The person who set up the original Yuan dynasty country was Genghis Khan. If you heard the things he said, you would know exactly what kind of person he was.
He said,
Do not blame your family for being bad. I lost my father when I was 9 and was kicked out of my hometown. Do not blame your poverty. I ate wild mice and endured a war in my lifetime. My job put my life on the line, but that was my job. Do not blame me for being born in a small country. I had no friends other than the shadows around me. There were about 100,000 soldiers, and there were less than 2 million people, including the elderly and children. Do not blame your lack of education and power. I did not know how to write my name. Instead, I learned how to listen, and so I listened to others. It was not about the small things on the outside. Rather, the answer was inside of me all along. I swept up and threw away all my clumsiness, and when I had overcome that part of myself, I had become Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan conquered the world with his own conviction, but in his eyes, he did not see the crown of life that we see. Then, we have the promise of God. God's promise does not change, it is faithful. It is not without a road to reach it. However, it is our own minds that block that road. The trial itself is not the problem. Rather, it is the fact that we cannot believe in God's promise. That is the problem.
Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. James 1:12. In this verse, the word test in the original version is dov kimo. It is a test starting from the outside. It is a test that God gives. It is a test for educational purposes. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. James 1:13. In this verse, the word test is originally perazovmino. It is a test starting from the inside. It is a test that Satan gives. The purpose of the test is destructive. The first is an educational test. It is given by God. It is given from the outside. The second is a destructive test. It is a test given by the devil. It is a test that comes from within me. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. James 1:13.
Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Genesis chapter 22, verse 1 through 2.
God had said to the Israelites that they have tested the obedience of the law.
When tempted, no one should say, "God is tempting me," for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. James chapter 1, verse 13. There the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. He said, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Exodus chapter 15, verse 25b through 26.
God declared the commandments and tested the people to see whether or not they would keep them. If this is true, what does it mean when it is said that God doesn't test anyone? It means that God doesn't put us through destructive trials, trials that the devil would give, or trials that end in catastrophes. But in the case that you are tested by God, you will go through a trial given by him, a trial given from the outside. After the test is over, there will be a blessing prepared for you. It is a great blessing to be recognized as being right in the test. The test given to us from God is the task of making my bowl a big bowl. In Korea, bowls are used as an analogy for one's self, faith, or heart. Making your bowl a big bowl means to increase or make better one's self, faith, or heart. In this case, your bowl equals your faith. It will serve as training for me to make the virtue of my character complete.
In our country, the story of Jinyoung is well known by all. In the story, the son of the governor, Lee Mong-yong, who came to Namwon, goes out and sees Jinyoung, who is swinging on a swing, and he falls in love with her at first sight. Jinyoung was the daughter of a family from a poor background, though her mother, Wo-mei, was a courtesan well known for her beauty. Mong-yong and Jinyoung loved each other, despite the differences in their social status, and the two promised to be together in the future. Then, Lee Mong-yong went to the city of Hanyang in order to take a royal exam. In his absence, during autumn, a new governor came in and took over Mong-yong's position. The new governor was captivated by Jinyoung's beauty, which she had inherited from her mother, and he asked her to become his courtesan. However, Jinyoung loved Mong-yong and had promised to wait for his return, so she declined the new governor. For rejecting him, the new governor confined her to a prison. Mong-yong, having become a lawmaker, came back and found out Jinyoung was imprisoned, but he hid his identity as the son of the governor. Wo-mei, Jinyoung's mother, treated the new governor well, but felt angry inside. After all, the governor Pyun, who came to Namwon, was a dictatorial tyrant. After assessing the situation and having taken everything into consideration, Mong-yong revealed himself at the court in Namwon and had Governor Pyun arrested and stripped of his position. With that, Mong-yong and Jinyoung were able to live happily ever after. This is a famous love story in Korea that ends with a happy ending. In Jinyoung's story, there was a code known as promise, and a code where one keeps that promise and remains loyal no matter the circumstances.
James said that it is a blessing to be tested. Some may ask, but how can I bear such a trial? It is because there is a promise. If you pass the test successfully, there is a promise that God made with you. Jinyoung was also tempted. Governor Pyun tried to persuade her to be his courtesan, but since she rejected him, he was angry. However, by staying true to Lee Mong-yong, Jinyoung could face him and the promise the two of them made together with her head held high. If she had not stayed faithful to him, then their love would have been worthless. The promise they made would have been meaningless as well. We will face all kinds of difficulties during trials, but we must always remain loyal to our faith so that we can stand before God. Satan will refute us, and so, against Satan, who uses all of the wisdom he has to bring us down, we must rally our faith. We must be recognized as being right in our trials. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. James 1:12.
Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Genesis 22:12b. Abraham went through the trial and was recognized as being right. For passing the test, God blessed Abraham. Abraham received the following blessings from God after passing the test. He was blessed with great wealth, God promised to protect Abraham from his enemies, it was decided that the Messiah would be born of Abraham's offspring and that all his descendants will be prosperous through Abraham. Abraham received blessings for himself, blessings for his family, blessings for the nation, and blessings for all people.
There is a test coming from the devil. The devil's trials are destructive. They are his attempts to tempt you into sinning. If you accept his trials and take his test, in the end, you will end up sinning. You will be ruined. You will be sick. Your relationship with others will crumble, and you will be betrayed. You can even end up selling your soul to the devil, ultimately sending yourself to hell. You will shed tears. The devil's trials mainly come from within us.
But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. James 1:14. In the Korean Bible, this verse is read as, "But each person is dragged away by their own evil desire, having been deceived by temptation." Deceived.
The word deceive can pertain to the bait of a fisher. The fisher keeps bait for fishing. This bait is something that the fish like. It is a food that fish like to eat. If you keep looking at the bait and become tempted to go for it, then eventually you will be the one caught by the fisher. Before one is married, they will continuously fight for their pride when conversing. However, when someone who is married is trying to persuade their spouse, they will never fight. They will throw their bait into the water with great focus and concentration. When the fish starts nipping at the bait, the fisher waits in anticipation, so that when the water starts moving from the bait, he can focus all of his attention on it and aim straight. Finally, the fisher will catch the fish.
I caught it!
He will be filled with joy. As the fisher pulls the fish up, he will feel thrilled. The devil tempts us. To try and drag us into sin, he throws bait out for us. When we are deceived by him, he feels thrilled. Just like that, we end up taking the bait the devil sets up for us and get caught in the trap of sin. At that point, it will be too late to go back because you will have been completely caught in the devil's trap. At that time, please think about the happy fisherman who is pulling up his rod while laughing about his great success. Think of the fisher as the devil. The devil throws bait out for us and finally catches you. You are caught in his trap, and he feels thrilled. The devil shows his teeth as he laughs. Please try imagining the devil singing in his delight. You will get goosebumps at the thought.
Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. James 1:15. You enjoy eating a little bit of the bait, then you get caught in the fishing hook. Before you know it, your whole body is being dragged. The end result is death. Before your sin, the temptation seems so alluring, so sweet. Before one falls into greed, a powerful temptation is put before them.
It's so beautiful.
I want it so much.
It's so captivating
that I can't possibly give up on it.
It approaches us so that we cannot let go of it. When you try to give up on that desire, your heart will burn. But this is the most terrifying part of sin. Sin is nothing. It is simply covering itself in dazzling makeup so that we are deceived by its outer appearance. If we fall for it, we are just like Samson, who had his eyes gouged out. Because all sins are addictive to a horrifying extent. Once you have sinned, even a warrior cannot escape from its clutches. Once you fall into sin, the devil's true attack begins. That is, to attack your conscience and prevent you from ever going back to God's side. And socially, he will expose your sins to the world in order to completely ruin you.
By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Hebrews 11:24-25. It said pleasures of sin. There is a lie pertaining to sin. Sinning is an exciting event accompanied by pleasure. However, you must not be fooled by that phrase, pleasures of sin. The very verse also says, rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin, the pleasures of sin only last for a short while. They do not last long.
There is a story called Satan and the Honey Water Bottles. It begins with Satan visiting a young man. He presented 2 bottles to him and said,
one of these bottles contains delicious honey water, and the other contains a potent poison. If you choose one of these bottles randomly and drink it, I will give you lots of money.
Before the young man's eyes, sacks overflowing with money piled up and formed a mountain of money. Satan said to him,
That's right. Your life is one that's going to end in death anyways. But if you test your luck once and avoid picking the bottle of poison, thus picking the bottle of honey water, then you will never have to toil through life again. So try it. The chances are 50-50.
The young man was worried, but in the end he picked the bottle and drank it. It was the bottle full of honey water. Satan gave the young man a large sum of money. From that moment on, the young man began to spend a crazy amount of money. The money could not last forever, and so, eventually, he ran out.
Having had a taste of what it was like to be wealthy, the young man felt very uncomfortable, no longer having money. So this time, the young man went to go visit Satan himself. Once he had found Satan, he asked him,
"Can you please give me one more chance to gamble?"
Satan replied happily,
You want to go on another adventure with your life on the line? Sure.
Satan brought out 2 bottles before the man once again. One of the bottles contained poison, the other contained honey. The man was very fortunate, and purely by luck, he chose the bottle of honey once again. Whenever the young man ran out of money, he went to go visit Satan again. He no longer had any intention to work earnestly to earn money. The man's luck was very good, and he always chose the honey water. Finally, the man became 60 years old. He gambled with his life once again. Which one will he pick? His hands trembled. His back began to sweat. He put the bottle to his lips and drank. It was the honey water. It was then that Satan laughed calmly and drank the contents of the remaining bottle. Then he said,
From the start, there was never any bottles containing poison, but you are dying from the poison that I gave you all this time. Money. I have completed my task of corrupting your soul and thus bringing you to hell. Though you are born as a human, you are brought to ruin by money and pleasure. It was not as a human that you were living, but as my servant. You must go before the great king of hell.
The next words Satan said shocked the now old man.
I drank the last bottle, so I can't give you the promised money.
After saying those words, Satan left. Money, woman, pleasure. The old man had lost it all and lived a life without any meaning whatsoever. Until the day of his death, he lived out the rest of his days living a cursed life.
The secret to being triumphant in the trials. The secret for a person to be able to overcome Satan's temptation is to avoid being narrow-minded. One should consider all the possible consequences that may occur from their actions. Today you may be able to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin, but it is but for a moment. What comes after? When you open your eyes tomorrow morning, the sting of sin will strike you. You will begin to feel the consequences of the sin you committed. There will be failure. There will be tears. There will be shame. Death will follow. You will be thrown into an abyss of misery. The devil's trial is one that destroys the blessings I have ahead of me. Therefore, the secret to win over temptation, to win over the devil's trials, is to control the greed within you and be broad-minded, understanding the consequences of sin.
There is another way not to fall prey to Satan's trials. It is by staying true to the Word of God. If you look at the law, there are a few things that God will tell a person who will become a king. First, do not own many horses. The horse were powerful animals during war. The best weapons they had at the time were horsemen. The reason that the former Soviet Union and the Communist Party of China collapsed was because instead of trying to provide a good education to their inhabitants and creating a robust economic system or trying to create a warm and friendly society, they were only focusing on making themselves powerful in battle. Because of this, over time, their national strength was weak. A country that only cares about the strength of its military and struggles with war cannot last in the long run. In this sense, North Korea cannot last long. The economic power of making atomic bombs has already come to an end.
Second, do not have many wives. In the Book of Kings, women are of great importance. When a woman with false beliefs enters a household, she will corrupt her husband and her children. She will be judged by God, just as Jezebel was. However, in contrast, when a woman of God enters a household, she can lead the way for her husband and children, so that they may believe and be saved. Women are greatly influential, so much so that they changed the course of history itself many times. It was Hannah that gave birth to Samuel, not anyone else. It is important for young women who marry to know that when they become mothers in the future, they will have great influence over their family.
Third, do not build up silver for yourself. Read Che In-ho's novel called Sangdo. We refer to the wealthy as the rich, and we refer to those who are even wealthier as millionaires. It is the same with businesses also. Those who run successful businesses are referred to as daesang in Korean, meaning big businessmen. And for those who own even more successful businesses are called gosang in Korean, loosely translating to colossus. During the Joseon dynasty, there was a real-life gosang businessman by the name of Im Sang-ok. He was even nicknamed the Buddha of Commerce. Because of his success as a businessman, he was not a greedy man. He did not keep 100% of the money he earned. Instead, he was satisfied with receiving only 70% and put aside the leftover 30%. He saw wealth as being akin to water, flowing equally without end. Wealth is equal because it cannot be owned by an individual forever. He believed it was like a stream of water flowing from a high elevation down to a lower elevation. He once made such a remark.
Businesses aren't about trying to make a profit. Rather, it is about trying to obtain people.
The biggest thing that believers should watch out for are things that are secular. We must prevent doubt from creeping up inside of us. We cannot change the world without first changing ourselves. A Christian without change is not working for the glory of Christ. Those who always have the Bible at their side and read it diligently, as well as those who always pray, do not undergo trials. After all, tests given to us by God are for the sake of our growth. They are tests given for the sake of granting us blessings. Trials like those are in compliance with the Word. Accept it when you are recognized as being right after those trials. Persevere through those trials that come from the outside.
The trials that are given to us from the devil are tests that tempt us to sin. They are destructive in nature and are solely for the sake of relishing temporary pleasures through sin. If you go through with them, after a while you will feel the sting of sin. Think of the consequences that come with sin and firmly resist the devil. A person of faith can overcome the short-lived pleasures of sin and clearly see the consequences that come with sin. Those who are broad-minded and thus see the consequences of sin are those who can overcome the devil's temptations during his trials.
In the book of Genesis, Joseph was tested. Potiphar bought Joseph as a slave, but when he saw how wise Joseph was, he put him in charge of the household. From that point on, Potiphar himself did not interfere with the affairs of the household, instead delegating everything to Joseph. Joseph saw to it that everything within his master's household was in conformity. Every day, Potiphar's wife gazed at Joseph and tempted him to sleep with her. Joseph visited Potiphar's wife's house once a day as part of his duties. One day, when he was making his daily visit to her house, Potiphar's wife grabbed Joseph's clothes and said,
"Come to bed with me."
At that time, only the two of them were there in the house.
Joseph was around his 20s at the time of this event. There is an interesting analogy about intimacy that goes by one's age. It is said that the 20s are like a match. As soon as you draw the match, it catches fire. The 30s are like firewood. As long as you pour oil on it, it blazes brilliantly. The 40s are like briquettes. They're surprisingly hot. The 50s are like bonfires. It seems like their fires have died out, but if you look closer, their fires are actually still going. The 60s are like cigarettes. Though they seem to have died out, if you puff on them once more, they light up again. Do you know what kind of fire the 70s are like?
Let's see the fire that went out come back again.
Though Joseph was in his 20s, which is like a match that lights fire instantly, he was able to overcome temptation.
What did Joseph say in response? He said,
"No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Genesis 39:9.
What is the proposition of a true Christian's life? With what sort of attitude should the people living on this earth live with? It is to live while being aware of your consciousness. Being aware of your consciousness means being in front of God, knowing that He is listening to me and observing my actions. It is because Joseph is aware of his consciousness in this sense that he says, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?"
Joseph was aware of his consciousness. That is why he was able to overcome the temptation from Potiphar's wife. When a person is tempted, they become weak. However, a person with an awareness of their consciousness can resist temptation. Right now, though you cannot see Him, there is God right beside you. Who else is beside you? There is someone who is reporting everything you do, that is, an angel. A person who is conscious of God and the angel's presences is able to live a righteous life. People who do not have such an awareness lie, they judge others, they watch sexually explicit videos, they read porn magazines.
All of us are able to become saints who are recognized as being right after the trials God gives us. We must not give in to the devil's tests, which are only meant to take away our blessings, but instead, we must live a life where we can triumph over such trials.